know you Darklings have heard Christian talk about Manscaped, but guess what? It's not just about razors and male grooming anymore. Allow me to introduce the new Scalp Buffer, a gender-neutral product for your cleansing routine, available at manscaped.com, where you can get 20% off plus free shipping with the code PRETTYDARK. My hair loves to hang on to product, which usually drives me crazy, but thankfully the Scalp Buffer's thick silicone bristles are 100% antibacterial, helping our scalp stay clean and refreshed by gently exfoliating dry skin and reducing product buildup. Plus, the separation and lather it creates enhances shampoo penetration, making your shampoo last longer, which means saving money for more important things like maybe your Halloween costume. It's designed to stimulate blood flow to your hair follicles, and come on, we all know increased blood flow means healthier hair. Personally, I have trouble remembering to use certain products, and I hate a complicated routine. Just your typical shampoo with the Scalp Buffer adds all of these benefits without compromising more time. Simply put, the Scalp Buffer is your favorite scalp's favorite product. Have I said the word scalp enough times yet? Give your hair care routine a serious yet simple upgrade. Grab the Scalp Buffer and get yourself 20% off plus free shipping with the code PRETTYDARK at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code PRETTYDARK at manscaped.com.
Pumpkins! Look at them all! A pumpkin tree.
No! A Halloween tree!
You're listening to That's Pretty Dark,
The podcast where we talk about all of the entertainment that scared us as children
and still haunts us as adults. So grab your flashlight and join us as we take a frightfully nostalgic look over our shoulders
and under our beds
and in our closets.
And together we'll realize, whoa, that's pretty dark.
Pretty dark.
I love how festive we get for these types of episodes.
Yeah, me too.
You have your pumpkins and ghosties.
I've got pumpkins,
Sure.
ghosties. You've got some skeletons, pumpkins.
I have a Pottsfield Harvest Festival sweatshirt. It's awesome. You wouldn't know about that.
Oh.
You haven't seen Over the Garden Wall.
No,
so,
I wouldn't, actually.
yeah.
I saw the one with the bell, which
That's the one I showed you.
I've seen it twice because you and my other friend group showed it to me. So
It's the best episode.
everybody agreed Kaylin needed to see this,
Yeah.
and they made it happen. I was scared it would make me sad.
What, the show?
You never know with me.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
You never know what's going to hit the
I
button.
guess that's true.
Honestly.
A lot
Like,
like
for example,
this episode.
yeah, Halloween tree. Although both of us were pretty certain this was gonna hit my sad buttons, and it did.
Yeah, it was the
It
right
did.
move. So a little backstory, if you guys don't know. We prepared this episode last year, and then Kaylin's diagnosis came through, and it was just too heavy,
It was too heavy.
for us to get
Couldn't
into.
do it.
So I went ahead and finished the script, with all of that energy of like saving my friend from the brink of death if at all possible, because that's what all these kids do in this story. So it's
And
incredibly
that isn't
existential
metaphorical
and
or allegorical or
macabre.
anything. That's pretty much
No.
just straight up plot.
Quite literally, that is what happens. And yeah, it is a time, and we are going to get into it, and it's going to be awesome because we're doing it together because we are never really alone.
Yeah.
And this is one of those episodes that we're really going to have to lean into that, and I hope that it reminds everybody just how true that is because some of these days get real dark.
We are not alone on this journey. What is it called? To the Undiscovered Country.
The Undiscovered Country.
Hopefully
That's
we
right.
will survive our trip.
I am one of your intrepid leaders this evening on this journey. My name is Christian.
And I'm Gilligan. Kaylin.
We're going to make it out just fine. Just fine.
A 3-hour tour.
And you guys are listening to That's Pretty Dark. And tonight is one of those nights that it's going to get pretty dang dark tonight and next week. Because this is a 2-part series to wrap up our big October.
Big, beautiful October.
Our big, beautiful, wonderful October time. So let's jump into the All-Hallowtide, shall we?
I guess.
Brace yourself. Brace yourself. Ready, set, go. On the surface, The Halloween Tree is a 1993 animated TV movie about a group of children who set out to save their friend from the brink of death
As you said.
by exploring the history of Halloween with the help of a supernatural entity named Mr. Moundshroud.
Worst name ever.
Doesn't it have a nice ring to it, though?
Just
Kaylee?
immediately off-putting.
Doesn't it sound for you? Deeper, however, It's about how the innate human fear of mortality and the unknown has shaped civilization as we know it.
Snaps for that.
And how Halloween is more than just costumes and candy. Rather, it's the confluence of every culture's attempts across the world throughout all time to keep the metaphysical darkness at bay.
Preach.
By preserving a hope in the afterlife.
Love it.
Preserving, because, mummies.
Okay, now I'm actually excited.
Yeah?
I was really nervous. Now I'm feeling it a little more. I'm like, yeah, that's right. This is what we do to make sense of it, to make it okay.
Of course.
Keep our control, the control that we have, which is all an illusion, but that's the beauty of Halloween.
Sure. That's why all these things exist, because we have to pretend like we can control all these things.
Got to.
And yeah, we talked a lot about all of that with our History of Halloween series, which if you guys have listened to, you've already heard us talk about this whole concept for roughly 6 hours. But if you haven't, then please do.
Yeah, it's perfect time of year, even if you already have, to revisit.
All that breaks down so much more of this direct lineage of Halloween from its origins to the present day. Way more than we're going to be able to get into with this series. But I will say that I'm very glad we have that foundation to build off of. But we could have just as easily used the Halloween tree as the framework for that Halloween history series.
100%.
The only problem is it would have been a 4 or 5 part series on the Halloween tree.
So instead, we just split it up over several Octobers.
Kind of worked out.
Definitely just heard some creaking sound in my attic. Definitely did.
I think we should pause it and you should go check it out.
No thanks.
Speaking of,
I'm good.
I had to, that big opening beneath my office where I'm sitting currently right now?
I do, yes.
It's like extra storage essentially for my house. And
I'm familiar.
It was super cluttered and there was a bunch of stuff from the guy who used to live here,
remember.
Mr. Houston.
I went through it with you a couple times.
I threw out a lot of it the other day when I was trying to make room for a bunch of new firewood. And I heard the same thing you just heard, like creaking floorboards in my office above my head.
He wasn't pleased.
It really,
that you were getting rid of his stuff.
That night and then over the next couple nights, I kept hearing things in the house, like people walking around, moving stuff. I swear he was restless.
Damn.
He was frustrated that I was throwing away his things.
Damn.
And it's going to be a while before I do that again. But anyway.
Yeah, you got to, again, split that up over several Octobers.
Got to. But I'm glad to have the ghosts around because this is the time for ghosts. The screenplay for this movie was adapted from the 1972 book of the same name, both of which were written by one of my very favorite thinkers and writers, Ray Bradbury, who we just learned this year was originally hired to write the Nemo and Slumberland screenplay. And as always, there are many, many differences between the book and the movie, a few of which we're going to address, but we'll do our best not to get too bogged down because, well, it's almost Halloween. We have far too much to learn, and Pip desperately needs saving.
Honestly, I'm really excited for you to cover a Ray Bradbury story because for as long as I've known you, you made more sense to me as a person when I read or heard prose by Ray Bradbury.
Right.
I was like, here's Christian. This is where he comes from. It's like it's like
that's
if
the
you
soil
watch,
from which I grew.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's like if you watch Peter Pan or like I don't even know.
Casper Meets Wendy.
Or The Princess Diaries. You're going to be like,
Freaky
that's
Friday.
where Kaylin comes from.
Or Gilmore Girls.
Sure, exactly. There are plenty. But this was one of those moments for me where I was like, I see my friend in this.
Aww.
And then in Halloween Tree, it was even more pronounced. I was like, this is the intersection, this spookiness with the Ray Bradbury like flair and flavor is totally the way that you are in my head, in my memory.
Wow.
Like, I can just see his influence on your writing.
Yeah. Yeah, you always wonder how other people view you, and you always hope it's a positive thing. And
I mean,
I'm sure there's a lot that could be said. No, that's great. That means a lot. I mean, yeah, like he's easily one of my greatest creative influences. I mean, his writing has, shaped not only my approach to story, but my entire outlook on things like life, time, death, and even the past, especially with things like this.
The really important stuff.
Right.
I just know you're in there.
That warms my heart. That makes me feel really, really good.
And hopefully our Darklings feel the same way when they watch content now that we've covered over the years, honestly. Maybe they'll be like, yes, we know you.
I hope so.
We see you. It's nice to be seen,
Wow, all right. Just going to enjoy the warm fuzzies for a second. I've been compared to Ray Bradbury. Wow, first time. It's the first time for everything.
I mean, hey.
Mr. Ray Bradbury where to begin. He was one of the most influential writers of the 20th century and is considered to have changed the science fiction landscape. He also wrote horror, fantasy, realism, and mystery. He was quoted by his contemporaries, recognized by Alfred Hitchcock, borrowed by Stephen King, plagiarized by the Tales from the Crypt comics. And I first fell in love with his prose in high school when I read Fahrenheit 451, the anti-fascism masterpiece on what a book-burning future might look like. A future that we may come very close to in the next few years.
Future that we're already too close to. Hey guys, are you registered to vote? Just checking. You only got another couple weeks.
Did you see Jimmy Carter fulfilled his dream of voting?
He did, yes. Very proud of him.
I love that.
Stayed alive.
Little weird peanut skeleton man. Like he did something right.
Peanut skeleton man.
But my love for Ray Bradbury only grew once I read Something Wicked This Way Comes. Another horrifying masterpiece that established the trope of the evil carnival setting up in town overnight, leading to many a strange and mystifying occurrence, all wrapped up in a whimsical pining for childhood and a terrific fear of getting older. And every October, I read at least one or two pieces from his collection of strange short stories, October Country, while sipping a pumpkin beer, of course.
No other way to do it.
No other way.
Unless
to
you're
do
me, you can't have pumpkin beer.
I do feel horrible for you.
You should.
Ray Bradbury is a master of nostalgia and one of autumn's greatest champions. In being no stranger to dark fantasy, many, if not all, of his works fit under one simple descriptor: Midwestern surrealism. And that is the soil from which the Halloween tree grew. Watered by Bradbury's own obsession with Halloween and his passion for learning about the traditions and festivals observed by other cultures to remember and honor their dead. The production background of this movie is one of the most straightforward I think we've come across in our 3 years.
Oh, yeah?
2 words. David Kirshner.
Oh, well, we've come across those words before also.
We sure have. As we've said before on the show.
I can't say his name right to save my life, but it doesn't mean we don't appreciate him. It really doesn't.
And as we've said before, if it was dark and spooky and it appealed to children in any way, David Kirshner wanted to make it a movie. And Ray Bradbury's nostalgic, magical, emotionally devastating kids' fantasy book, The Halloween Tree, was a no-brainer. Especially considering that the original version of the story wasn't a book, but a screenplay that Ray Bradbury wrote in 1967 to be produced by none other than Chuck Jones.
Whoa.
Of Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies fame.
So this was something that Ray was like looking toward from the very earliest concept.
He wrote it to be an animated film early, yes.
Wow.
But for reasons I'm unaware of, the project was never greenlit. So he repurposed the work into a book, which goes a long way toward explaining the odd structure of the narrative, the style of the writing, and why the strongest characters are Pip and Moundshroud, who propel the story forward with a little help from Tom Skelton, but barely. A limited edition author's preferred text of the story was released in 2005, which includes the novel, the 1992 screenplay, and the original 1967 screenplay.
Wow.
And when I say that I need a copy,
I was already mentally making a note of that in my head.
I need it, Kaylin. Wink, wink.
Nudge, nudge. Heard, chef.
Hands. Well, 1993 was a big year for David Kirshner. Not only did he produce Hocus Pocus for Disney.
There it is.
Which we talked all about, 2 Octobers ago. But he also produced 3 other projects for Hanna-Barbera: the Addams Family animated series, Once Upon a Forest, and The Halloween Tree.
Something happened to him. Something. I wish that we had better insight into his like day-to-day during this time frame, because something happened.
Did he uncover the genie's bottle, the lamp?
I don't know.
What did he come across? What ancient ruins did he stumble upon?
But also something devastated him. You know what I mean? Like it was.
Oh, you mean like in like a
trauma kind of way? Like
a traumatizing kind of way.
It could have been either way. I don't know. Something.
I don't know. I go the opposite.
So, you go the way of the divinely inspired. I go the way of the just crushed from the inside out somehow.
He did love making children cry, but
He sure did. But laugh as well.
Yeah. Got to. And Mario Peluso was hired to direct. He'd mostly done storyboard and layout work since the 70s, working on animated classics such as The New Adventures of Batman, Spider-Man, The Smurfs, Heathcliff, Richie Rich, G.I. Joe, Fat Albert, My Little Pony, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Captain Planet, The Addams Family, Cat Dog, and Hey Arnold, among many others. And the animation itself was produced for Hanna-Barbera by Phil Cartoons, of the Philippines. I think we've discussed them before.
We have.
And the finished product was distributed by Turner Broadcasting System.
Always goes back to Turner.
Is this like a highlight reel of That's Pretty Dark? Like all the things we've covered?
Feels that way.
And depending on which source you're trusting, it premiered on ABC either on October 2nd of 1993 or October 18th.
Okay.
But why it wasn't premiered on TBS or Cartoon Network, I don't know.
That is kind of odd.
What I do know is that it has often been aired on Cartoon Network during the Halloween season ever since. But either way, true or not, IMDb trivia says that this was the first Halloween movie to ever premiere on a cable channel.
Whoa.
Isn't that something?
The first ever?
It doesn't seem like it should be true, but that's what it said.
1993?
I don't know. I haven't done deep research. Yeah, it would be 93.
All right, Darklings. Help us out if you want to fact check for us.
Let's stick the Darklings on this historical research.
Get them.
You guys know a lot more than we do sometimes, so let us know.
We're told some fascinating things in our DMs, not a euphemism.
Like you up. What? Interesting conversation. Well, following a successful premiere, it was released on VHS by Turner Home Entertainment multiple times, but the first was on September 14th, 1994. This release, as well as the August 1995 release, which featured the Yogi Bear short Bewitched Bear, both included a free copy of the book.
Wow. And
there was a Laserdisc release with Ray Bradbury audio commentary, a Cartoon Network video series release, a Warner Home video release, and finally, the two copies that I own myself, the Warner Archive release on DVD in 2012, followed by another DVD release in 2016.
That's quite a lot of releases. I mean, we don't always detail that on the show in terms of, stuff that we cover, but that is
it was just
quite
so
a few.
Many. Yeah.
A lot of times we'll get like an anniversary edition of something, or it'll come out once or twice, but that seems
it's got legs.
Like a lot.
It's got longevity. It's got life.
That's what you get for like a TV movie, I guess.
Oh, well done. Kids movie.
Kids saw
TV
it
movie.
and they wanted it. If you get it in front of their eyeballs, they're going to want to own it.
That's true.
On VHS.
That's true, and I am no exception. Well, what do you say? Shall we sail off away deep into the undiscovered country of old death and strange years and the frightful past where death itself lurks in wait to collect our very souls? Do you think we have the stuff?
You know what? Starting out today, I wasn't so sure, but I think we just might have the stuff.
Yeah, you feeling better about it?
Let's see if we have the stuff.
This is a
I want to know.
Perfect example of just facing looking at the monster, facing the fear and confronting it and kind of going, it really wasn't as bad as I thought in my head.
Yeah, we do it from time to time. This one is a big one for me to jump the hurdle, sail away into the abyss, but bring it on, in the words of our Lord and Savior Cusco.
All right, good. Well, I feel much more confident. I can't do this alone. So.
No, of course not. You're never really alone.
Oh, good. That's a relief. Both the book and the movie open the same way, with almost the exact same words first written and then narrated by Ray Bradbury himself.
Right up front when the cartoon opens, it looks like the illustrations of a book.
It does, doesn't it?
This has to have been his dream come true, because it truly looks as if it's been illustrated like a book.
That's one of the first things I wrote, actually, that the animation is apple pie gorgeous. Because it's this all-American Midwestern town. And I love the use of color in this movie. It's done really well.
Whatever way I felt about Little Nemo and not liking the color, I felt the exact opposite way about Halloween Tree.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the color.
That's a good point. And I don't always notice the music in movies like this either, but something about this score left me feeling all kinds of things. And then I realized that's because it's John Debney, who did the music for Hocus Pocus. So no wonder it's that whimsical, wonderful, nostalgic vibe.
It was a small town by a small river and a small lake in a small northern part of a Midwest state. There wasn't so much wilderness around that you couldn't see the town. On the other hand, there wasn't so much town around that you couldn't see and feel and touch the wilderness. The town was full of fences to walk on and sidewalks to skate on, and the muted cries and laughter of boys and girls, full of costume dreams and pumpkin spirits, preparing for the greatest night of the year, better than Easter, better than Christmas, Halloween.
The movie chooses to just sort of focus on the atmosphere of the town, and the book does this as well, but it also takes it a step further, leaning heavily into that picturesque, childhood, frightful nostalgia of Halloween night.
It feels so good until it doesn't.
I know.
So good.
I know.
It was the afternoon of Halloween, and all the houses shut against a cool wind, and the town full of cold sunlight. But suddenly, the day was gone. Night came out from under each tree and spread. Behind the doors of all the houses, there was a scurry of mouse feet, muted cries, flickerings of light. Behind one door, Tom Skelton, aged 13, stopped and listened. The wind outside nested in each tree, prowled the sidewalks in invisible treads like unseen cats. Tom Skelton shivered. Anyone could see that the wind was a special wind this night, and the darkness took on a special feel because it was All Hallows Eve. Everything seemed cut from soft black velvet, or gold or orange velvet. Smoke panted up out of 1,000 chimneys like the plumes of funeral parades. From kitchen windows drifted 2 pumpkin smells, gourds being cut, pies being baked.
I love everything about the way he wrote this book, and I could not include every section,
we couldn't
every
just sit here and read
moment.
the book to you, Darklings.
I mean, I want to sign myself up to do the audiobook. I'm not going to lie. I need to look into that, see if that exists. But yeah, so if I don't include your favorite passage or something, don't worry, I didn't include my favorite passages either. I had to include ones that merely propelled our story forward.
Get us where we need to go.
Exactly.
But this is true. I mean, it's captured so well. I remember talking about it with you in the Rocket Power episode we did very early in our first October.
Yeah.
Because we talked about the night before Halloween.
Right. Mischief Night.
Because there is such a distinct feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it comes with the changing of the seasons depending on where you live.
Right.
But there is that very distinct Halloween feeling. Even on Halloweens of my childhood, I have had weather of all kinds on Halloween.
Cold, hot, rainy.
Cold, hot, raining, storming, muggy, and disgusting.
It is hurricane season.
Chilly. We've had it all around here, but like there's still a feeling. It is unmistakable, and it has been there as long as I can remember. And I love it.
And that's something that we all strive to like describe. And Ray Bradbury, I think, spent his life trying to capture that feeling in prose.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
And this comes close. This and Something Wicked This Way come very, very close to that feeling.
It's so hard to do. When you feel something that's that intangible, how do you make it tangible?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that a lot of us artists really just live our lives trying to do.
Yeah.
And it feels really good when you get close.
Hey.
That's what she said.
Yeah, buddy.
I'll do it this time.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think of Ray Bradbury as Father Autumn.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's just what he is.
I can see that.
And to speak to that, every bit of narration going forward in the movie is almost word for word from the book, though often condensed for the sake of the film and timing and pacing. And I think the device of the narrator here in this movie was chosen in keeping with the tradition of oral storytelling.
I liked it.
Which would convey a sense of both nostalgia and safety.
Mm-hmm.
Because narrated films typically end well.
Typically.
You know, they typically have happy endings.
That's where Happily Ever After comes from.
But then there's kind of like the whole season of Bly Manor that's narrated, and it doesn't have a happy ending.
True.
And you're kind of like, wait, but you're supposed to protect us, narrator. Why would you betray us like that?
Now I'm thinking of other things that have narration that end.
There are a few.
Less than happily.
But, yes, few and far between for a pretty good reason.
Because it gives you structure. It gives you support.
Things we all need.
You can say that again.
We quickly meet our 4 main characters, getting dressed in their costumes for a memorable night of tricks and treats during what appears to be the 1950s, the era known as the Golden Age of Trick-or-Treat, which we've often argued should be the 90s.
It should.
But
I think that a lot of Darklings listening would back us up on that.
Jenny, you're gonna raise the dead with all that racket down there.
Just looking for another broom, Mom.
in order of appearance, we have Jenny, the witch, who is searching for another broom to fix to the side of her bicycle. But did you notice the reference to Hocus Pocus?
You can always use the new vacuum cleaner.
Ha ha, very funny.
Oh, Kirshner.
Jenny is voiced by Annie Barker, who only has a few credits, including appearing in 2 episodes of Seventh Heaven.
A little more on my arm. There. That's it. Oh yeah, by the way, Dad, sorry about using up all your gauze.
Ralph, the mummy, who accomplishes his costume by borrowing a ton of gauze from his father, who appears to be a doctor of some kind, a doctor who somehow has no knowledge of Pip's illness, despite being neighbors.
Yeah.
Ralph is voiced by Alex Greenwald, who played Seth Devlin in Donnie Darko, and is the lead singer of a band called Phantom Planet.
You don't say.
A band which used to have Jason Schwartzman on drums until 2003. And their song California was the theme song for the OC.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I knew their name.
A little cultural tie-in there.
Sure is.
We have Wally the monster, who is sure his costume will scare even Pip. Wally is voiced by Andrew Keegan, who played Joey Donner from 10 Things I Hate About You.
We know Andrew Keegan.
Pensive, going for thoughtful. He also appeared in Sabrina the Teenage Witch and 24 episodes of Seventh Heaven as Wilson West.
Man, I need to rewatch Sabrina. I've been really dying to.
But yeah, he appeared in Boy Meets World, Step by Step, Full House, Baywatch, and he played Luke in the 1995 Freaky Friday.
Hey.
Tom Skelton, you're one lucky boy. A name like Skelton on a night like this?
And the serendipitously named Tom Skelton, who digs through the attic to find his dusty old costume. A green, seemingly glow-in-the-dark skeleton suit. Tom Skelton is voiced by Eden Gross, who famously voiced Friendly Chucky in Child's Play, Tommy Doll in Child's Play 2, and Good Guy Doll from Child's Play 3.
So he enjoyed horror movies.
Yeah. He did a lot of other cool stuff too, like voicing characters in 8 episodes of Ren and Stimpy. He voiced Flounder in 30 episodes of the Little Mermaid TV series.
That's a jump.
He appeared in Cheers and The Twilight Zone. And I have to make a personal correction.
Uh-oh.
From just last episode.
Oh no.
I was wrong about the Monster Mash being the only instance where Dracula has a son. Eden also voiced Little Dracula in the short-lived animated series Little Dracula.
Little Dracula.
Little Dracula is the son of Big Dracula.
Wasn't there another Little Dracula movie with Jonathan Lipnicki?
There was like a Little Vampires movie or something.
The Little Vampire. Yeah.
Little Vampire, right.
Not the child of Dracula.
Not specifically.
Okay.
That he knows of.
Gotcha.
Other costumes spotted around town include a cowboy, a musketeer, a Viking, a couple aliens.
Always gotta have a couple aliens.
An Indian, a fairy princess, a lion-looking thing, and a bedsheet ghost.
And a bedsheet ghost.
All right, we made it!
And all in a rush, these kids meet up at the designated intersection. The only problem is, one of them is missing. Pip. Joe Pipkin, the greatest boy who ever lived.
Don't make me cry.
In an 80s live action, Pip would have totally been played by River Phoenix. And I say that because when reading the book again, he immediately reminded me of River's character from Stand By Me, based on the Stephen King story, The Body, which is just one of a few inspirations I think Stephen King took from Mr. Ray Bradbury.
Makes sense.
There's his house. Uh-huh.
Impossible.
And arriving at Pip's house, the kids notice that his house isn't decorated for Halloween like usual.
Where are the jack-o'-lanterns? And the corn shops on the porch?
And monsters clinging to the roof. Something's wrong, awfully wrong.
Instead, what we see is the sad result of Halloween decorations begun, then abandoned. Loose streamers dangling from the porch, a ladder left propped against the roof, a singular jack-o'-lantern.
Oh, Pip.
And out front, the kids see Pip and his parents being wheeled off in an ambulance. A note on the door explains that he has appendicitis and that they should enjoy Halloween without him. Ready, set, go.
Gut punch.
Appendicitis?
You can die from that, right?
Yeah. Didn't need that clarification.
Pretty thick dose of reality right off the bat.
So this is one of few things that we've covered thus far that I actually did not see in my childhood. And I think there are a few reasons for that we will no doubt discuss.
Yeah.
But when I was watching it last year, I was in such a state of fear in my life in general. And I started off thinking, you know what? This might be all right. This might be okay. I knew that it was going to be heavy, but I was like, but this feels good. It feels heavy in a good way. Like there's a lot of nostalgia in this. This might be all right. And then as soon as the ambulance came around the corner, my stomach just dropped through my butt. And I was like, well, never mind.
Yeah.
This no longer feels good. And
it didn't feel safe anymore.
There were moments where it did from here on out. But that ambulance, man, and the mention of you can die from that. It's like, I didn't need to be that close to reality right then.
There's a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
in this one. I mean, and honestly, it just keeps doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. So if we couldn't get past the ambulance, there's no way we could have done
I struggled.
this
I'm not
last
going to
year.
lie. It was hard. It was hard for me.
And not to mention, the visual of them in front of the house is some really nicely done symbolism, if not very heavy symbolism. The sun begins to set, which dims the reflection of the orange light in the windows of the house.
The reflections in this movie.
Exactly.
You know me. I'm a puddle person. Like,
puddle person. I'm a potato person. You're a puddle person.
I love a good puddle. A good reflection of any type, really, but especially like that sort of vibe. And this film did it so often.
It did. And so the sun setting is just lighting up the windows in this orange glow. But as the light fades, as Pip is wheeled off in this ambulance, it appears as though all the life in the house is leaving with Pip as he goes to the hospital. That's intentional. That is the whole point.
Oh, it makes me so sick.
And the children are left there alone in the cold darkness of nightfall, just wondering if they're going to have anything resembling a Halloween night without Pip by their side. And boy, do they have it.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Hey Darklings, Kaylin here. We know our generation has a surplus of pretty darkness in common, and if there's one thing unpacking our upbringing has taught us, it's just how essential therapy is for shining a flashlight on the darkness in our own lives. I don't know where I'd be without mine. I believe every human can benefit from the perspective of a licensed therapist. Whether you're familiar with your own inner workings or you're just looking for a listening ear, you can give BetterHelp online therapy a try by going to betterhelp.com/prettydark and receive 10% off your first month. I get that online therapy can be tricky, but I've been seeing my therapist online since 2020, and I'm here to tell you that it's absolutely worth it. Getting started is always the hardest part, and BetterHelp makes that easy. You can begin right from your phone or computer in whatever way makes you most comfortable, via good old-fashioned phone calls, video chats, or even messaging, if that's more your style. We enjoy this frightful nostalgia and learning about how it all connects, but Darklings know we're also passionate about healing and growing from what we learn. If you dare to do the same, head to betterhelp.com/prettydark. There you can answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people like us. Plus, you can switch therapists at any time, so you're sure to find the right connection. Millennials are ditching the stigma and owning our mental health. And with BetterHelp, you can build a relationship with a professional all from the comfort of your own home, just how we like it. Visit betterhelp.com/prettydark or choose That's Pretty Dark podcast during sign up and enjoy 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/prettydark.
Well, these kids, these intrepid trick-or-treaters, get the bright idea to meet Pip at the hospital, taking the ever-fateful shortcut through the deep, dark woods, where Jenny, riding her bike at full speed, almost careens off the side of the cliff to her death before being saved by Tom.
There's the shortcut. Not the ravine.
Got any other shortcuts to choose from, Tom?
Ralph does have a point there.
And we quickly gather that the ravine is a place to be feared by children. And this is when they spot Pip, or something that looks like Pip.
Not Pip.
Down below.
Not quite.
Running along a path at the bottom of the ravine. Pip, it seems, is translucent in the moonlight.
He's a wraith.
Yeah! Yes, exactly. That is
so
Pip's.
Scary.
That is Pip's wraith. Because as we learned in our history of Halloween, a wraith is the apparition of a living person.
Whereas a ghost would be someone no longer living.
These are just as common on Halloween night as any other specter, spirit.
Ooh, man,
entity.
I got such a bad feeling as soon as I saw it. I was like, that is not Pip, but it almost is. And that means he's somewhere in between life and death, is what that told me as I was watching.
He's neither here nor there.
And that really, really got to me last year.
Me too.
Because I felt that way. I felt like a wraith of myself. Still do sometimes, but thankfully a little less often.
Just a wraith of my former self. And assuming that this is a Halloween night trick, they run after him through the ravine. In both the book and the movie, Ray Bradbury momentarily stops the narrative here to express just how much danger, darkness, and death awaits a young child at the bottom of a ravine in the woods.
The ravine. The ravine was filled with varieties of darkness, night, shadows, toad eyes, and raven beaks. The ravine, birthplace of wild mushroom, pale toadstool, whispers and drippings which call, come, stay, linger and hide. Hide here forever, never go, stay, stay.
In the movie, this is the last time the ravine is mentioned, but in the book, the ravine is mentioned multiple times, being used as a metaphor for death, the grave, the underworld, and the unknown.
They reached the edge of town and the place where civilization fell away in darkness. The ravine, filled with varieties of night sounds, lurking of black ink stream and creek, lingerings of autumns that rolled over in fire and bronze and died 1,000 years ago. From this deep place sprang mushroom and toadstool and cold stone frog and crawdad and spider. There was a long tunnel down there under the earth in which poisoned waters dripped and the echoes never ceased, calling, come, come, come. And if you do, you'll stay forever, forever. Drip, forever. Rustle, run, rush, whisper, and never go, go, go.
Tell me that didn't inspire Stephen King. That gives me strong Pennywise and the Pine Barrens vibes.
It absolutely does.
Oh my God.
Absolutely does. And don't we all have a ravine?
Yeah.
Wasn't there always a place in childhood where it was just the depths of darkness that you knew of? And
absolutely.
It was the darkest thing in your reality that you could lock into, you know, when you were conjuring or imagining the idea of the depths of something dark and abyss-like.
Right.
That's what you thought of.
A holler.
I grew up
canal.
right in front of what, like, they would call a retention pond in, like, a
I was
suburb.
about to mention the retention pond in your parents' backyard.
Yeah. There have been many memories tied to that retention pond, many of them bad in that way, because
I would have nightmares about that.
It was not especially deep, and it wasn't like it was super, super dark, or you could see the whole thing, you know, from my bedroom window. But it still just has that unknown feeling, even though it is like a retention pond man-made in the middle of a suburban area.
Right.
It still makes you...
It has a nefarious vibe.
Yeah, it really kind of does.
Man.
It kind of reminds me of like Sheol, for example, or like all of the biblical descriptions of a place like hell, because they were describing a real physical place that they would have all known about, with ashes and things constantly burning and a fire pit, like a pit-like place.
Right.
It was all tied to this actual physical place, used as metaphor.
That's a good point.
But they meant the literal physical place.
Man, humanity, we've always been the same. Nothing's changed.
Nothing's different.
We are still the same animal.
Stretching across cultures, which is a lot of what we're going to see here today.
Oh, yeah. In following what looked like Pip, the kids come to a towering mansion in a clearing, and Bradbury's narration here is another simplification of the original text.
The house was special and fine, and tall and dark. There must have been 1,000 windows in its sides, all shimmering with cold stars. It looked as if it had been cut out of black marble instead of built out of timbers. And inside, who could guess how many rooms, halls, breezeways, attics, superior and inferior attics, some higher than the others, some more filled with dust and webs and ancient leaves, or gold buried above ground in the sky, but lost away so high no ladder in town could take you there. The house beckoned with its towers, invited with its gummed-shut doors. Pirate ships are a tonic. Ancient forts are a boon. But a house... a haunted house, on All Hallows Eve. 8 small hearts beat up an absolute storm of glory and approbation. They were already crowding up the path, until they stood at last by a crumbling wall, looking up, and still further up, at the great tomb yard top of the old house. For that's what it seemed. The high mountain peak on the mansion was littered with what looked like black bones or iron rods, and enough chimneys to choke out smoke signals from 36 fires on sooty hearths hidden far below in the dim bowels of this monster place. With so many chimneys, the roof seemed a vast cemetery, each chimney signifying the burial place of some old god of fire or enchantress of steam, smoke, and firefly spark. Even as they watched, a kind of bleak exhalation of soot breathed up some 46 flues, darkening the sky still more, and putting out some few stars. Woof. I wrote down my notes from the narration of the movie about the With so many chimneys, the roof seemed a vast cemetery.
Yeah, the vast cemetery. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and part of that, again, is included in the narration in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But they use the animation to describe most of it. But you lose that flavor of the prose that he worked, exactly right, that he worked into this description. And I just think it's too beautiful not to include.
It hits hard. It hits different.
And in the movie, after climbing the organ keys of the front steps, which is a reference to the creaking porch boards playing cadaver tunes in the book, they knock on the Marley Knocker.
Marley Knocker. I wrote that down,
which is
too.
a significant reference to A Christmas Carol. In that seeing the face of Jacob Marley's ghost is the very first hint of the haunting that Scrooge is destined to endure. This is drastically underplayed in the movie. In the book, this makes it very clear that Moundshroud is quite literally the spirit of Halloween past.
Like the ghost of Christmas past.
Yes.
I like it.
Movie Moundshroud is voiced by Leonard Nimoy.
Yes, he
of
is.
Star Trek fame.
Yes.
Who famously played the character Spock and also voiced Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in The Pagemaster.
Pagemaster is another one of those that you should see me in, should you know me.
Yes, another example.
It's one of those titles.
And speaking of Moundshroud's voice, he beckons them inside, and a giant gust of wind forces them to obey the command.
Would have ruined me as a child, in a very bad way.
And this is where they meet Carapace Clavicle Moundshroud.
And somehow his full name is even worse.
I know. Who presents his business card, which says time management. He carries a pocket watch, which keeps time by way of hourglass, and he laments that he has no time for these children who have disturbed him with their trick-or-treat. And he proceeds to insult them by pointing out that they don't even know why they're wearing costumes in the first place, which becomes a very important plot device.
Oh, I'm wasting my breath. All dressed up for All Hallows Eve, but you don't know why, or what, or even from where.
This, of course, is when a ghostly Pip steals out from behind a chair and runs out back to climb to the top of the Halloween tree, with all of its hanging pumpkins with their various jack-o'-lantern faces.
The pumpkins on the tree were not mere pumpkins. Each had a face sliced in it. Each face was different. Every nose was a weirder nose. Every mouth smiled hideously in some new way. 1,000 grimaces and twice times 1,000 glares of fresh-cut eyes. Each blink held the remnant holiday spirit of years gone by.
This to me felt like a dream.
Yeah?
Yeah, like he's climbing, he's getting away, he's running away, he's going to climb to the highest height of the tree that he possibly can. And you're kind of chasing him. Like, you want to get to him, you want to find him, like the kids want that. So that's what you want as a viewer.
Sure, yes.
And that gave me that dreamlike feeling of like, I'm trying to chase something, I'm trying to grasp something, I just can't quite get it.
Yeah.
And that feeling follows through a lot of the movie.
In this version, there's a jack-o'-lantern that resembles Pip's own face, freckles and all. And because this pumpkin represents his soul, he steals it, much to the awe of the children and the utter dismay of Moundshroud. He falls with his pumpkin fire soul into a giant pile of autumn leaves, which is then spirited away into the sky by Moundshroud, taking Pip with it.
It's so dreamy.
Help me! Help me!
Pipkin was voiced by Kevin Michaels, aka Kevin Smets, who also appeared on Baywatch and played Tenpin in Newsies.
Hey.
And voiced Derek Generic in 47 episodes of Bobby's World. It seems like he also had a solid career editing for various TV series.
That's cool. I love when people transition.
But here is where I want to catch us up on the book. I've mentioned the Marley Knocker and how Moundshroud is the spirit of Halloween past.
Or death.
In the movie, he's an obvious villain with a clever scheme to use these children to recapture Pip's soul. But in the book, Moundshroud is much more enigmatic, but describes himself as a friend to lads.
Most villains would do that, though.
They would. But he seems to be much more of a ghost that's haunting this old house in the woods. He's dressed all in black, he has a pale white face and bony fingers. He's tall and thin with blazing green fire eyes set deep into, quoting, little charred pits of sockets.
Ugh.
And at times, he's an elusive trickster who takes many different forms throughout the story, but this is because he prizes tricks over treats. For example, you know that pile of autumn leaves at the base of the Halloween tree?
Mm-hmm.
His first trick in the book is pretending to be the skeletal remains of a corpse inside that pile of leaves. So when the kids all jump into it, surprise, there's a body in there.
You guys enjoy jumping in leaves this autumn time and try not to imagine that there's a corpse underneath there.
Try not to
Hope
imagine
you can do that
there's
again
a body.
And enjoy it.
Sort of darkens that house I went to as a kid, and they said, to get a treat, you must have a trick first. And I don't remember what happened after that. So
I don't like that you don't remember it.
I'm just gonna continue on.
There's some repression there.
But yes, the through line in the book is that he's always there as a guardian and instructor of the children. In fact, the definition of carapace is something regarded as a protective or defensive layer. It's also another word for the hard upper shell of a turtle, crustacean, or arachnid.
Them crawdads.
So I guess the only question is, what is he actually protecting? This group of children he's chaperoning through time and space, or Halloween's ancient traditions?
Or death itself, which is the vibe that I got.
In the movie, yes. In the book, he's distinctly different from death. A lot of it's up to interpretation and which sort of canon you subscribe to.
I mean, it seemed almost like he was protecting death as a concept.
Yeah.
As a sacred thing.
Which, you know,
not necessarily sinister or villain, just death is to be revered and,
I mean,
respected, I guess.
Is it not? It's like if he is a fixture of this sort of...
like a guardian of death, a grisly reaper.
Yeah, just mowing his lawn. The biggest difference between the movie and the book are the kids themselves. As I've said, Joe Pipkin, Tom Skelton, and Mr. Moundshroud are present in both. But in the book, there are 8 children, Pip being the 9th. And they're all boys, no girls. And their names are mentioned, like the mummy is Ralph and the gargoyle is Wally, but they're typically referred to by their costume, which I think was a conscious choice because by identifying them as their costume, the costume becomes their identity, which is sort of the whole point of this history lesson. So we have skeleton, witch, ape man, gargoyle, beggar, grim reaper, mummy. Later, he says there's also a ghost and a devil boy. If you're counting, this makes 9.
Yeah.
So I thought I was crazy, but I found an article on Odd Things I've Seen called The Mystery of Devil Boy that agrees with me that it has to be a continuity error.
Whoops.
Glad to know I'm not alone, but I just can't fathom this making it past multiple revisions and edits and like, what's the point? Did nobody ever ask Mr. Bradbury why? Something of a mystery. And since we're on topic of Halloween icon representation, the movie doesn't just go with the skeleton, witch, mummy, and monster, but Moundshroud himself resembles a vampire, and Pip is quite literally a ghost.
We hit all the highlights.
Or a wraith, as we've said. In both versions, it's the same. Pip can't go trick-or-treating because he has appendicitis, only that doesn't become clear in the book until the very end.
Oh. So you're even more in doubt of whether he's going to make it.
Yes, you don't know what's happening to Pip the whole time.
Ugh.
When they go to his house at the very beginning of the book, he meets them on the porch himself. He's weak, he's in pain, he's tearful, and he says to meet him at the haunted house out by the ravine. He gives them their instructions. On your marks, get set, go.
I don't know which is worse, the ambulance or the weak, tired, ill child.
Because they're like they run off to go to go where he's telling them, and they look back and they're like, "Come on, what are you doing?" And he's like, "I'll catch up with you. Just go."
They never catch up.
Go. And like the further they go, the further they run, they keep looking back.
Yeah.
And it describes as something like the darkness takes him. It's really
that's something
difficult. It's heavy. Well, once they've met Moundshroud, who says, "No treats, only trick," the jack-o'-lanterns on the Halloween tree come alive with their internal flames. And as Ray Bradbury writes, from somewhere 2 voices, 3, or maybe 4 voices, whispered and chanted a kind of sing-song or old sea shanty of the sky and time and the earth, turning over into sleep. And now I will read The Halloween Tree Song.
Okay, I'm ready.
From the house, the rain spouts, the windows, the shutters, the chimneys, this song begins to form like this weird otherworldly whisper, echo.
The music of the hills. They're alive.
Exactly, something like that.
The sound of it,
It's big, it's broad, it's bright. It fills the sky of All Hallows Night. The strangest sight you've ever seen, the monster tree on Halloween. The leaves have burned to golden red, the grass is brown, the old year dead. But hang the harvest high, oh see, the candle constellations on the Halloween tree. The stars they turn, the candles burn, and the mouse leaves scurry on the cold wind borne. And a mob of smiles shine down on thee from the gourds hung high on the Halloween tree. The smile of the witch and the smile of the cat, the smile of the beast and the smile of the bat, the smile of the reaper taking his fee, all cut and glimmer on the Halloween tree.
Shivers.
Hear me out.
Okay.
Tim Burton, Henry Selick, Danny Elfman.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get the band back together. The Halloween tree.
For one night only.
Stop motion animation. Please, God.
I'm surprised they haven't.
Henry Selick.
You can't convince me Danny Elfman hasn't held a petition for that at one time or another.
There are a couple songs. There's 2 or 3. I could see him having a blast.
He looks good.
Yeah,
he looks good, by the way.
He's doing great.
He's looking great.
I know. He's really killing it. He's crushing it. He knows exactly what he's doing, and I'm proud of him. Couldn't be happier for Mr. Elfman. Well, Mound Shroud asks if any of them know why they're wearing these costumes, but none of them can say why. And promising to show them by exploring the history of Halloween, he takes them to the edge of the ravine and points out, asking if they can see it. See what? Well, the undiscovered country. The past, boys, the past. Oh, it's dark, yes, and full of nightmare. Everything that Halloween ever was lie buried there. Witches, cats, mummy dusts, haunts. It's all there in that country from which no one returns. Will you dive into the dark ocean, boys? Will you fly into the dark sky?
The night is dark and full of terrors.
And that's where Pip comes running through the ravine toward them, carrying his lit jack-o'-lantern pumpkin to keep him safe in the darkness. But he trips, and he falls, and the light goes out. Now, we've talked all about the history of jack-o'-lanterns and how they became apotropaic symbols of protection on Halloween night. So without his lantern to protect him,
he's vulnerable to the darkness.
And something large and dark swoops in and carries Pip off into the undiscovered country. The idea presented here is that the dark figure was Death, come to hold Pip ransom. And Mound Shroud says, if we fly fast, maybe we can catch Pipkin. Grab his sweet Halloween corn candy soul, bring him back, pop him in bed, toast him warm, save his breath. What say, lads? Would you solve 2 mysteries in one? Search and seek for lost Pipkin and solve Halloween all in one fell, dark blow? And in the movie, Mound Shroud makes a similar proposition, except with much more selfish motives. For him, this adventure is a means to the end of collecting Pip's pumpkin fire soul. But I have thoughts on the book version of Mound Shroud and what his intentions are. Yet, here, both versions sync up to begin the journey.
The undiscovered country it is. Feast your eyes. 1,000 Halloweens wait out there to swallow us whole. That barn. And on the sides of the barn, the makings of an October kite. Do you see?
To follow after Pip, Mound Shroud takes them to a barn covered in old circus posters and instructs them to use the paper to build a kite, which they then help to fly straight by forming the weighted tail. And once airborne, the children travel 4,000 years into the past and land in the sands of ancient Egypt.
Another reference to dark circus culture.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
All up in there.
But this circus animal kite represents a few important things.
For one, it looks like a dark version of something out of like a show at Animal Kingdom.
It really does.
In Disney World.
Yeah. Kites in general symbolize the innocence and joy and wonder of childhood. But the thing about this autumn kite, this October kite, is that the images of all the ferocious man-eaters come to life And its final form also ends up resembling that of a pterodactyl in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, kites represent youth, but a prehistoric kite assembled from snarling beasts seems to suggest that their journey is going to be an unsafe one.
It does suggest that.
At best. Because nobody has a close call with a predator and walks away unchanged. Meaning this journey is going to affect them in some very profound ways.
I was picking that up already.
In other words, as much as they don't want to, they're going to be forced to grow up just a little bit.
Woof.
And there's more to these ferocious animals than just the kite. But since there was no ape man costume in the movie, this sequence wasn't included. So you're welcome, Darklings, for giving you all the insider information.
I mean, that's what we're here for.
In the book, there's a scene that plays out right at the tail end of the whole ancient Egypt segment, which we're about to focus on for the remainder of tonight's episode. In the darkness of the Egyptian tomb, it momentarily becomes the darkness of a cave, where there are prehistoric drawings on the walls. An even more ancient scene plays out, which depicts an ape man, or a caveman, discovering fire and using it to fight off a saber-toothed tiger. The art continues to illustrate how that fire, an earthly symbol of the sun, was brought into the cave and used for protection against the monsters living out in the night, in the dark, and for warmth against bitter winter's cold. So Tom asks, what's that got to do with Halloween? To which Moundshroud basically says, well, I'm glad you asked.
When you and your friends die every day, there's no time to think of death, is there? Only time to run. But when you stop running at long last, now you have time to think of where you came from, where you're going. And fire lights the way, boys. Fire in your own cave to protect you. Only by night fires was the caveman, beast man, able to at last turn his thoughts on a spit and base them with wonder. The sun died in the sky. Winter came on like a great white beast shaking its fur, burying him. How that must have scared early man, eh? That was the big death. If the sun went away forever, then what? So in the middle of autumn, everything dying, ape man turned in their sleep, remembered their own dead of the last year. Ghosts called in their heads. Memories, that's what ghosts are, but ape men didn't know that. Behind their eyelids, late nights, the memory ghosts called, waved, danced. So ape men woke up, tossed twigs on the fire, shivered, and wept. They could drive away wolves, but not memories, not ghosts. So they held tight to their ribs, prayed for spring, watched the fire, thanked invisible gods for harvests of fruit and nuts. Halloween indeed, 1,000,000 years ago, in a cave in autumn, with ghosts inside heads, and the sun lost.
This is something we've touched on quite a bit in our 3 years.
Yeah, and it's important to think about, too, like when the fight or flight is at bay, just a little bit, that's exactly when you start to think, and you start to wonder, and you start to dream. And great things come from this. Imagination comes from this. When there's time to imagine, that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
But right along with imagination
comes nightmares.
Comes fear, nightmares, memories that haunt you that you didn't have time to consider until you were in your deep, dark cave of winter.
Yep.
Or coming winter, I guess.
Once we were able to stop living in survival mode, we were able to think up the idea of ghosts and gods and benevolent and malevolent creatures.
Just as soon as
we had a second, our imagination kicked in.
We created something else to be afraid of.
That is the power of the human imagination. I've never personally associated man-eaters with Halloween or October, but like we're just saying, we've mentioned the evolution of fear a good bit on the show. How our evolutionary fear of the dark comes from what wild animals, aka monsters, waited for us out in the darkness. And all the mythology, fairy tales, and folklore that is stemmed from these very practical threats.
Basic biology. It all has its roots in those caves. In early man and what he found to be afraid of.
And it makes so much sense that, Ray Bradbury would have spent time thinking about this because, he had a lifelong fascination with carnivals, like we've said, and circuses, and associating them with what we now call the spooky season. Well, in both versions, Ray Bradbury begins the adventure in ancient Egypt to explain Halloween's association with mummies.
It's a place we visited a couple times
Yes.
on That's Pretty Dark so far.
And I'll go ahead and say here that Bradbury's depictions of history should not be taken as fact. He's taking a lot of different aspects of history and mushing them together into a work of fantastical fiction for children.
Mm-hmm.
He did know all of this history very well, so it has foundations in truth, but the way it's presented here in this work is not necessarily historically accurate.
You are not watching an episode of Magic School Bus.
No, this is just my PSA. This is not the Discovery Channel. And although the book drops them off at the Valley of the Kings, in the movie, the kids take a stroll through the Egyptian village, and they see an ancient version of Trick or Treat, where people are setting out food and drink for wandering spirits, actual souls of the dead that are returning home for the night and enjoying the offerings of food. In the book, these are called the homecoming ghosts. In the movie, this is named as the Feast of the Ghosts, which was never a real thing.
Okay. I had a question mark next to it, in my notes. So I was like, surely Kaylin would have heard of this before.
He's taking real life, Middle English history and folklore from the British Isles and applying it to ancient Egypt. Don't ask me why.
So this did happen, just later.
Yeah,
in other geographic contexts.
In different hemisphere entirely. But we will explore the actual Egyptian customs here in just a moment. But first, we have to talk about the great-grandfather mummy at the dinner table. So the kids spot Pip about to eat some of the food being left out, and they follow him into a house where a family is celebrating what is called the Feast of the Ghosts. They pass around a bowl of food that Wally tries to hand off to a mummy sat at the head of the table, startling them all. And the woman of the house explains in perfect English.
Oh, he's been dead for 67 years.
So what's he doing here?
Once a year at the Feast of the Ghosts, we invite him out to sit with us. Eat.
And this is a super macabre concept, and I love it. But this really is just Ray Bradbury's imagination. Nobody in ancient Egypt would have dared keep a relative's mummified corpse in their own home, let alone release it from where it's protected.
Yeah, they did a bunch of burial rites and sacred rituals whenever they buried people. I can't imagine they'd be digging it up every couple months to say, hey.
It would totally, completely, entirely defeat the whole point of the mummification process.
Which kind of makes me feel a little bit annoyed with Mr. Bradbury, because it's a situation where it's like, culturally speaking, this would have been the furthest thing from something that they would have done. And if we're here to respect the cultures and understand them better, why do?
Yeah, I don't. I have theories, but none of them really would hold up in court. I don't think it just...
I'm glad we can set the record straight
just
here.
know that we're there with you guys. If you guys are scratching your head, we're there too. I think he had a reason for it, but it's not excusable.
No.
So...
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
I just keep going back to, it's a kid's story. It's for children. It's fantasy. Get over it.
I think that I could more easily put those glasses on and filter it that way.
Yeah.
If he wasn't so heavy-handed with the respect your culture, respect your history, know your history.
Yeah.
If he didn't also, he wasn't double dipping and feeding us that message just as strongly, if not,
it's true.
If not more.
It's true.
I think I could let it go. But as it stands, you know what? I'm not gonna.
I'm right there with you. I'm kind of frustrated. Yeah. Especially knowing what we know from our history of Halloween.
There you have
series,
it. There you heard it. This is our official That's Pretty Dark stance. We don't like it. We don't like that it deviated this much.
Which is why I leaned so heavily into getting those facts right.
Mm-hmm. Take your creative liberties, but don't alter the customs of a culture to fit what you would like your children's story to be. A story that is heavily dependent on honoring culture.
I know.
That's it.
Yeah.
Might not be the last time we're saying this. Let's dig in.
It's very much not the last time we're going to say that.
Don't you wish we had a custom like this back home? Dinner for the dead.
Now, All of the forward motion in the movie is propelled by Pip's escapes, which inspires the pursuit of Moundshroud and friends to a new place or period of time. Movie Pip is very autonomous in this way and very much in control of his own actions. Book Pip is much more an unfortunate victim to the circumstances of the history being
Swirly,
explored.
twirly gumdrops.
Yes,
Of it
he
all.
is forced to participate in the rituals that the other kids are learning about, not as one of the living folk, but one of the dead ones, such as being mummified and buried in a sarcophagus in the Egyptian tomb, which is where the movie takes us next.
Let's watch our friend be
Just
buried.
living their worst fears.
I didn't even like that he was fading a little bit
Yeah, he was.
in the movie. I didn't like that.
Yeah, he's
It's kind of sick.
back and forth towing that line of
Because in my head, even though it's probably actually good if the wraith disappears, because that means you're fully living, maybe.
maybe.
The other and more terrifying option is that it means you're fully dead.
Never thought about wraiths like that in that context, but
Me
I
neither.
guess this
Because
is
I was
where we
thinking,
are.
like, you want him to be alive, not in this
Yeah.
ghost body. But then as soon as he starts fading, it's like, you know what? That's a bad thing. That is a bad thing. I can't confirm how or why, but I know it shouldn't be happening.
Essentially, the wraith would be his astral projection at this point.
Right.
It is Pip. It's just not.
His body is somewhere else, yeah.
And I mean, in the whole context of the story, you could argue that none of the children are actually here. That's something I don't really get into. Are the kids actually on this adventure?
It could all be a dream.
Are they all tripping balls beneath the Halloween tree?
Probably. They had themselves some real fun candy apples.
The ultimate trick of the treat.
Pip didn't go in there, did he? Oh, great.
At the entrance of the Valley of the Kings, a long strip of mummy wrapping is unfurled from within the tomb, leading the kids down into the darkness, where Moundshroud has taken the appearance of a shriveled mummy. He quickly explains how day is killed by night, summer by winter. And in the book, he's coaxing them down into the dark and warning them to look out for murder, repeating the word murder, practically screaming it at them as they wonder what awaits them down in the dark. If I had to guess, murder.
Murder.
And this all has to do with the incredibly complex mythology of the ancient Egyptian god Osiris, which the movie mistakenly says was the sun god.
Oh no. Ra was the sun god.
Right.
Everyone knows that.
In the book, Osiris is described as the son of the earth and sky and king of the dead, which is much more accurate. As we know, and as we've discussed on the show, ancient Egyptian mythology is incredibly complicated because it also changed over time as different gods and goddesses became more popular, not unlike dance crazes.
Egyptian society lasted so long. Unthinkably long.
Longer than we even know of history.
The pyramids were ancient to Cleopatra.
Yes.
I think we said that before, but like trying to put that in perspective, we can't even do it.
Mythologies were melded together and stories were changed along with the roles of different characters. For example, most people now consider Anubis to be the Egyptian god of the dead. But there was a time when Osiris was believed to have dominion over the dead, specifically in regard to resurrection.
Maybe there was a time when Osiris was the sun god.
In this scenario, Anubis is lord of the mummy wrapping because it's said that he embalmed Osiris after Osiris was murdered. And mummy comes from mamiya, the Arabic word for an embalmed corpse. And some Egyptian art depicts Anubis leading the dead to Osiris for judgment.
Okay.
Mamiya.
So Anubis would be more of the reaper.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. In some of the earliest Egyptian texts, Osiris was also sometimes associated with Ra, the sun god, the actual sun god.
There he is.
And the nightly journey of Ra through the underworld, aka the afterlife, then resurrected each morning. The idea here is that Osiris' soul/essence aids Ra in this nightly journey and gives him the power to overcome death on the reg. So without Osiris' help, Ra would fail, and this technically makes Osiris king of the underworld and god of the afterlife and resurrection.
It's very much like Ouroboros, like in concept. Like everything really is at its core, which is why I have an Ouroboros tattoo. Because correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to remind myself of my Egyptian mythology. But Osiris had a twin sister that was also his wife, Isis.
Yes.
And she's like fertility, rebirth, healing, growth, magic, motherhood.
I'm about to talk about Isis.
Okay. All right. I'm not too far off base, but it's very much that like yin and yang.
Yes, for sure.
Idea.
So why is Osiris a huge player in this whole afterlife/resurrection game? It's because in all of his mythologies, he's betrayed and murdered by his jealous brother Seth. His body is cut into many pieces, 26 supposedly, and his wife/sister, Isis, puts him back together and wraps him up.
Good job, Isis.
I guess with the help of Anubis, who embalmed him. And when it comes to the mythology of Horus, who is Osiris' son, it's said that Isis only resurrected Osiris so they could do it mummy style, so she could bear him a son.
Got it.
Horus.
This
makes Osiris also a god of fertility.
Even in pieces. Good for him.
It only takes one piece. Another story says that Osiris was killed by being sealed into a box and thrown into the river Nile, where he drowned.
In denial.
In denial of life, and breath, and air, and oxygen.
It is a river in Egypt.
Isis then retrieved him and resurrected him, which is what gives him dominion over the annual flooding of the Nile, which is what the Egyptians relied on for, life.
Irrigation.
No flood equals no harvest. So this also makes Osiris a god of agriculture and vegetation.
He does it all. 26 pieces and he's got him in everything. I was trying to do like he has his hands in everything, but I didn't get there.
26 problems, but death ain't one. I don't know. I had to look into all this because when I read about Osiris, he was the god of like everything. And I was like, why? And I had to figure out all these different mythologies. And of course, all of these
split interests
would have come from different cults, different, factions of people who believe certain mythologies. So these are all pieces of different parts of ancient Egyptian mythology, all thrown into one podcast episode. So forgive me for condensing. Maybe we should forgive Ray Bradbury.
I was literally about to say, is this
bit.
Why? No, I can't. The Egyptians would have never eaten at a table with their relative.
He took it too far.
Yeah.
But now that we have a little more background on Osiris, the Feast of the Ghosts that's mentioned in the movie is a very anglicized compilation of at least 3 ancient Egyptian festivals.
Okay.
That's Wag, Wipet Rinpet, and Wadi. Wadi was actually pretty similar to Dia de Muertos, and it's closest to what's depicted in the Halloween tree. World History Encyclopedia says,
people visited with their departed loved ones at their tombs and brought bouquets of flowers and food and drink offerings. Egyptologist Lynn Meskill describes the focus of the celebration. The beautiful Festival of the Wadi was a key example of a festival of the dead which took place between the harvest and the Nile flood. In it, the divine boat of Amen traveled from the Karnak temple to the necropolis of western Thebes. A large procession followed, and the living and dead were thought to commune near the graves, which became houses of the joy of the heart on that occasion. Images of the deceased were carried in the procession so their souls might join in the festivities and were left in the tombs when the festival was completed.
So in the tombs, not in the household.
Right.
Important distinction.
Very important distinction.
And Wag and Wipet Rinpet were both observed in honor of Osiris. Wipet Rinpet is the New Year's celebration of Osiris's necessary death and resurrection, so he can assist in the return of both the sun and life each morning and every spring. It's basically Egyptian Easter. And during Wag, people would make paper boats and push them across the Nile to the west, because all their burial places were to the west of the Nile. It was meant to symbolize safe travels for Osiris and their deceased loved ones who were now in his care. But Osiris was also their judge, and their only hope at being reborn into the afterlife, which was the whole purpose of the mummification process in the first place, to preserve
they
the
were
body
going to continue on
so
somewhere
that the
else.
soul can return to it, or enter the afterlife in some capacity. And as Mound Shroud says,
the Egyptians, why they built to last. 10,000 years they planned for. Tombs, boys, tombs. Graves, mummies, bones. Death, death. Death was at the very heart, gizzard, light, soul, and body of their life. Tombs and more tombs with secret passages, so none might be found, so grave robbers could not borrow souls and toys and gold. You were a mummy boy, because that was how they dressed for eternity. Spun up in a cocoon of threads, they hope to come forth like lovely butterflies in some far, dear-loving world. Know your cocoon, boy. Touch the strange stuffs.
Touch the strange stuffs.
Stuffs with an S.
He has a way with these words, man.
Mm-hmm.
I love it
He
so
said
much.
it's a very
it's so
specific
unconventional.
way. It is unconventional. He
Right?
breaks a lot of convention.
He really, I mean, God, I just can't get enough
I do appreciate
of his
that.
prose. But that's why mummies in pop culture are so closely tied to resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Why the mummy comes to life and seeks revenge on those cursed few who were responsible for unsealing the tomb.
Yeah.
You know, we've already talked a lot about mummy curses from our King Ramses curse episode.
We did, yes.
Courage.
Yep, King Ramses' curse. That was a lot of mummy talk.
So much mummy talk. And we will absolutely, no doubt, dive deeper into horror movie mummy history at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But suffice it for now to say that it all has to do with the desecration of the Egyptian tombs by the entitled British Empire back in the 1800s. It's all cautionary allegory about not taking something that doesn't belong to you.
Which further proves our point that families wouldn't be doing this to their own tombs.
But, being dressed up as the mummy, Ralph is the first to realize the historical significance of his own costume when Pip is carried through the tomb in a sarcophagus by an ancient funeral procession.
It didn't feel good.
Pip's sarcophagus is decorated with a slingshot, a baseball, and a baseball bat. Hieroglyphs on the side resemble a bicycle, a boy running and jumping and swimming, bugs, musical instruments.
All of life.
All the makings of childhood, right.
Mm-hmm.
The book describes very similar things, too. But finding a moment alone, Ralph speaks with Pip in a way that 100% resembles a deathbed conversation.
Mm-hmm.
A bedside conversation? A bedside conversation?
Sarcophagus side, death bed conversation.
We did it. In fact, each of the kids get to have their own poignant moment with Pip in the movie, which, you know, Bradbury gets to do in the movie because there are fewer characters, there are fewer children. Mm-hmm. And the book moves far too quickly. They never really get a moment to rest.
Pipkin?
Ralphie, is that you?
Yeah, it's me. I'm gonna get you out of here.
I'm fading.
No, you can't leave now. What about all of our plans? You said someday you'd teach me how to bat left-handed, and you're the only friend who's never made fun of my wearing glasses.
Learning to bat left-handed isn't so hard, Ralphie.
We have unfinished business.
We have unfinished business. We have unrealized plans. We have things that we were supposed to do together. Pip, you can't go. You can't do this right now.
Yeah, that hurt me.
You can't die.
Hurt me deeply, especially in the place I was in last year. We all have to kind of make our peace with the fact that we'll never have enough time, as much time as we may have. And those of us humans who are very, very lucky do make it to the end of our lives with the knowledge that we've done what we set out to do or what we wanted to do, or, you know, we can look back and say, you know, we're proud of our time here. And hopefully more people can say that than not. But it's so scary to think, especially when you think of like a child in this case, or someone that's so young, or the place that I've had to live in with a lot of my fears and health challenges, which is I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, no, seriously, yeah.
You know, it's
there's too much to do.
You're gonna laugh at me. I'm always going to merge in the, you know, millennial, tween, preteen, early 2000s culture as much as I can with what we do here.
Sure.
And it reminds me very, very much of Bailey in The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, because Bailey is a young child experiencing an illness that no one should have to experience. And she has made a lot of peace with death and dying. Mm-hmm. And you see her interviewed by the camera. You know, she has like this stoicism about it that was jarring to me as a kid, because I was like, you're not crying, you're not upset, you're not sad. And it's like, you do work through that, you do cycle through that, especially when you're dealing with like a long-term illness.
Right.
No 2 days look the same in the face of something like that. And I feel like I can now say that with personal confidence. But Bailey says, I'm not afraid, not of dying really, just of time and not having enough of it. And that line that Bailey says has stuck with me for my whole life since I read that book.
That's how I feel.
And hearing Ralph saying those things to Pip with that urgency of like, we haven't had enough time yet. Like we haven't done this yet. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of living left to do. Like that urgency underneath it, that makes the grief so much deeper.
Yes.
And it definitely hit me hard. Because it's like, yeah, I'd like to say that I have peace about certain things now. I definitely have way more peace than I used to. And I wouldn't say that I have fear around death the way that I used to, but I do have fear around an unlived life.
Yes.
For sure.
Me too. That was a realization I came to. I always thought I had a fear of getting old, but really deep down, it's the fear of getting old too quickly.
Yeah.
And not living my life, wasting time.
And again, just like we're saying with the cavemen and the shadows on the wall, like these stories, this is how we process this. This is how we get through it. As hard as it was to watch Halloween Tree last year and as difficult as it would have been, I don't think I could have spoken this way in this articulate, ironic. I don't think I could have spoken this way or articulately about this at all last year.
Sure.
I could only get to this place that I'm in now by waiting and sitting on it for a year. But fiction helps us process these things. We come upon that all the time. You know, I'm not saying anything novel. It's just...
Yeah, I mean...
I think it's important.
This is one of those things, like, Ray Bradbury didn't write for children.
He wrote for people.
He wrote just for human beings. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't accustomed to pulling his punches. If you've read anything of his, you know that. He took the whole treat kids like humans/adults to the extreme.
Right.
And did not hold back when it comes to the realities of death.
Which is basically the tagline of our podcast at this point.
It's like he had no business doing this, but at the same time, it's like he is doing a service to adolescence. Like he's I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's like he's saying, you really don't know how good you have it. Mm-hmm. Embrace it. Live every moment you possibly can and never relinquish control.
Yeah.
Always hold fast to your own youth and just...
You don't know what you have until it's gone.
Yeah, I can't even imagine being Ray Bradbury and taking everything that we're saying right now and trying to write it into a story about Halloween, the history of it for our children, and trying to make it as poignant and as heavy-hitting as possible. But somehow he managed to do it.
He did.
And, well, that's why we're sitting here today.
Creative liberty.
But in the book, they see Pip's mummy-wrapped body being carried through the tombs, where he's then placed into the coffin, which is placed into the sarcophagus. Pip calls out for help, and they beg him to get out, but he can't. So he's carried off into the tomb for burial, where he's then sealed up behind a stone wall.
Okay.
But man, I just really love that the movie version of Ralph gets to scare off the Egyptians by pretending to be a living mummy.
That adds like a cute 90s Halloween flair to it, I think.
It makes it kid-friendly.
Yeah.
You know? They drop the sarcophagus and Pip escapes. Again, forward motion. And chasing after him, Moundshroud has the kids grab the four corners of his cape and they fly off through the sky to the Dark Ages in the British Isles.
The longest, darkest night in all dark time.
And that's where we're going to leave off for tonight.
That's where you want to stay, isn't it, Darklings?
We're going to live there for a week. So join us next week for our Halloween grand finale for the histories behind the remaining costumes, from witches and gargoyle lore to all the sugar skulls and candy skeletons of Dia de Muertos. Not to mention a haunting descent into one of the scariest places on Earth that I can't believe is a real place, followed by one of the darkest scenarios ever depicted in children's media.
Agreed.
In our pretty dark opinion.
That is an official pretty dark opinion, because it wrecked me.
Yeah,
it
me
wrecked
too.
my shit last year. I struggled.
I can't think about it without feeling that familiar twist in my stomach. So take that how you will.
Aren't y'all excited for Halloween? We have patrons to thank.
Ooh, we sure do.
Gotta give our patron shout-outs. The first one is Paige H., who is a dear friend of mine who I grew up trick-or-treating with, and she has now joined us on Patreon, which is so funny. She was my, Halloween buddy. I spent more Halloweens with her growing up, her and my sister, than anybody, so thanks for being on our Patreon page. That's very nice of you.
Thanks, Paige. It's cool. We also want to thank Theo S.
and Joshua C.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so, so, so very much. It is never taken for granted,
no,
even for a second, that anyone would be willing to support us like that with your hard-earned dollar bills. And if you, dear Darkling listening, are not part of our Patreon and would like to be, you can find us at patreon.com/TPD podcast.
That's right. You can also find us on all the socials at That's Pretty Dark.
That's Pretty Dark Podcast.
You can also reach out to us via email at that'sprettydarkpodcast@gmail.com.
Tell us how your October's going. Tell us what you're going to be for Halloween.
Yeah.
I may even put this on the Instagram soon because I love like seeing y'all's costumes, hearing your ideas. Let us know if you're dressing up as something that we've talked about on show, that
especially this
fun.
series, because it's so focused on the costumes
Halloween
that these kids are choosing to wear and the history of it.
Hopefully this episode will come out in plenty of time for you to share all of that Halloween prep excitement with us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you next time.
Happy Halloween. Almost.
Light those candles.
Buy that
Eat
candy.
that candy.
Don't forget.
I've been doing it.
Don't be caught unawares when the kids come to your door. End up with egg on your, I was going to say face, house.
Brutal albumin. Goddamn brutal albumin.
So good. Thanks for listening to That's Pretty Dark, written and produced by Christian Baxter Mott and Kaylin Andrews.
Our music is composed by Jonathan Simmons, and our art is provided by Paige Garland at Power Girl Illustration.
Join the collective nostalgia and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at That's Pretty Dark Podcast.
Share your experiences and let us know what shows, films, or villains still haunt you from childhood at that'sprettydarkpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, you're never really alone.
So until next time, sweet dreams, everyone.
Oh, I really have no time for this.